The most ordinary office, dull and boring. A place where people spend a lot of time of their precious lives doing monotonous and uninteresting work. Back problems, vision problems, digestive problems, and sometimes even hemorrhoids. All these shocks to the human body brings work, during which you constantly need to sit in place. Yadoja Kenta was precisely one such hostage of office work. Sitting down again on his creaking chair, he realized that he had been away from work for only 4 hours. Such a short rest didn't add any energy at all, and his eyes were still sore from the monitor screen. Yadoja Kenta tried to remember the last time he had slept at all. But the last time he had been in the realm of Morpheus was the day before yesterday, and that visit to the dream world had lasted no more than 2 hours. Such forgetfulness from exhaustion even amused Yadoja Kenta, but it was more of a nervous laugh. At the neighboring workstation, an equally tired colleague was snoring, while it was even possible to hear the guy talking to someone in his sleep. Yadoja Kenta mentally compared this whole situation in the office with a bunch of living dead people who only occasionally gave signs of normal existence. Lately, it had become the norm to spend even nights in this company. The new rules were rarely in favor of the employees, but you couldn't argue with that. Yadoja had been wanting to take a break from work for a long time now, no matter what reason he had for doing so. But it was very difficult to decide to take such a step, because like everyone else, he had a family. And to support them and pay the bills, he had to work as many hours as possible. Although such a load at work was only temporary, and sometimes, of course, there were quieter periods. But now the management was pushing for a new project, and so the workload had increased many times over. Yadoja remembered that tomorrow was already Saturday, and it would be possible to take a short break. It would be enough to make up a story that he had gotten really sick. There was even a nasty thought that if he survived all this exertion, the rest of the problems would be fine. Thoughts of a long rest and deep sleep were rubbing Yadoja's tired mind. He also wanted to have a quiet lunch, leisurely eating delicious food. After all, those bento boxes bought in supermarkets were already very tiresome. He also wanted to play new games, read light novels, and familiarize himself with new manga. Yadoja liked to daydream about his vacation because it allowed him to get away from the oppressive office environment. As he continued to plan his weekend, Yadoja felt a strange thirst and slight cramps in his stomach. The feeling of dry mouth was increasing and had to overpower his fatigue to get to his water bottle. Some kind of curse, a thought arose in my mind, for the bottle was completely empty. Yadoja cursed his terrible condition and got up from the chair. He just wanted to drink some water and get some sleep. But the weakness was so severe, and that nasty dry mouth was alarming. As soon as Yadoja got to his feet, his hands began to treacherously shake and couldn't even hold the empty bottle. An attack of weakness even caused his vision to blur, and Yadoja realized that he had driven himself to anemia. Damned work and damned life that sucked away all his strength. It was getting worse, and Yadoja lost his balance. Slowly falling to the floor, Yadoja thought how stupid it would be to die at work from overwork, and whether his coworkers would be shocked by such a death. Though for a while they wouldn't even realize that one of them had died. Everyone will think that he just lies on the floor and sleeps and will not even find out what's wrong. And who knows how long it will be until everyone realizes that Yadoja has stopped working. Some sort of unprecedented calmness or even amusement swept over Yadoja's realization it was completely indifferent to everything around him. The only regret was not being able to see much else in life. A feeling of falling endlessly into the void appeared. And at that moment, Yadoja realized that the best thing in life was to work moderately and take more time for his rest. But if it was death, it was too late to change anything. And if there is an afterlife, then one would have to try not to work at all and live a leisurely life. After all, wasting time working and completely forgetting about joy and fun is the biggest folly one can have in life. In this last moment of his life, Yadoja realized how wrong he was, but it was too late. A ringing female voice demanded to wake up. Then the demands became stronger and unpleasant pushes were added. Yadoja didn't want to wake up, for he was so tired. The nasty office took the last of his strength, but what was going on and who was going to be his was hard for his exhausted mind to comprehend. Some girl kept shouting indignantly that it was morning and time to get up. Still not understanding anything, I had to overpower myself and still flipped off the blanket. but I still did not want to open my eyes. I wanted to feel sleepy for at least another minute. Yadoja reached out and felt the warm rays of the sun. Opening his eyes, all doubts disappeared at once, because he had died and now experienced reincarnation into a new body. And now he had a completely different life. It was time to forget about his past life, where he had so stupidly died at his own work from overwork. The girl who had tried so hard to wake him up was his little sister Letty, and he himself in this new world was a guy named Tori. Tori didn't really want to get up, so he asked her to let him sleep a little longer. After all, children tend to give in to laziness and sleep longer. But Letty was very serious and forcefully tore off the blanket and demanded to get up immediately. Letty began to explain to her older brother that you cannot be so lazy. The girl opened the windows so that the fresh air would enter the room and quickly brush away all the sleepiness from Tori. The window revealed an incredible landscape of neat houses and a paved road. In the distance, one could even hear the clanking of horses and a wagon passed nearby. This world was very different from the usual Japan, because it was completely different. In other words, it was a completely different world. All the houses were built of good bricks and wood, and there were stone sidewalks everywhere. It was a real fantasy world where people traveled on horseback and the use of magic and swords was a priority. It was in this world that Yadoja had gotten his new life in the body of a child, and perhaps a second attempt at living a life was compensation for a stupid death on the job. Tori thanked his sister for her alarm clock function, but in reality, he still wanted to sleep and had a hard time pulling himself together. The only thing he wanted to do after reincarnation was to live a moderate and carefree life all the time and work as little as possible. That was his wish as he was dying on the floor of his office. Now he was born in a magical world in a town called Krasnoha, and he was the son of an innkeeper who owned a bird tavern. Even in this life and in the body of a child, he still had to work. But until he was 12 years old, he was not as much cared for as he could have been. And compared to his previous life, he didn't get much to worry about. Letty asked her brother to wake up soon, get dressed, and come downstairs, because she and Mom would be too busy if he didn't help. Also, his sister reminded him not to stare out the window too long and admire the scenery. Tori realized that this was the sister's way of hinting that there was no more time to waste. In fact, Tori would have loved to watch the street and admire the scenery all day long, for this world was a very beautiful place. But alas, family worries didn't allow him to do that, and he didn't want to argue with his family, so he had to pack up and go downstairs. The clothes in this world were the simplest and compared to the materials of modern Japan, such clothes seemed very rough. But it was understandable, because he was now reborn as a villager in a fantasy world, and his young body was endowed with energy and felt unprecedented strength. Tori quickly dressed and was ready to go downstairs. Tori decided not to repeat the mistakes of his past life and was going to work, but to do so without overworking himself. Overcoming the clanking wooden stairs, Tori found himself in the spacious living room where his mother and sister were waiting for him. Shira's mom, noticing Tori, immediately made a remark about his disheveled hair. Then her mother asked her to hurry to the kitchen and help. Shira was indignant at her son's terrible appearance and asked if he had just woken up when the sun had already risen. Tori didn't expect such criticism and asked if he looked that bad. Shira suggested that Tori start by washing his face and then get down to business. Tori was immediately sent to wash up, but was reminded not to waste too much time, as his help was waiting in the kitchen. Meanwhile, Letty was already diligently wiping down the tables, and Tori realized that his sister was trying to do whatever her mother instructed in order to be a helpful helper. Going to the well, Tori certainly didn't want to rush to work, but now was not the time to relax and needed to help his family. The well was incredibly deep, and the bucket hit the water with a thud. Tori thought it would be nice to apply the technology of modern society in this fantasy world. It would be very convenient to create a manual water pump and not waste time pulling out the bucket. But a person like him would arouse a lot of suspicion if he displayed incredible knowledge. Yes, and there were many magic tools in this new world. But as far as he was concerned, they were available to a few. Such tools were very expensive and were out of his reach. Although it is quite fun to get water with a bucket, it is inconvenient. Back in the kitchen, Tori met his father, whose name was Abel, and wished him a good morning. His father inquired if Tori had had time to freshen up and wash his face. Tori immediately proudly displayed his damp forehead and hands and explained that he had washed himself very thoroughly. Abel advised Tori to hurry up and put on a more masculine face to look like a true innkeeper. Tori didn't really understand his father's joke and thought that his face was already as sleepy as possible. Tori realized that he looked strange compared to his relatives, especially in the morning. His mother and sister woke up very early, and yet they were born beauties. His father was strict, but at the same time he was a very caring and kind man. His face expressed the real courage of a grown man. Tori took a closer look and noticed that he looked very much like his father, and even their hair was the same color. Abel noticed the strange look in his son's eyes and reminded him that they had work to do. His father also said that the farmer had come today and brought fresh tomatoes and cabbage, so there was no time to waste. Tori started peeling the vegetables, and his father told him that he wanted to make cabbage soup and small rolls with tomatoes. Abel asked Tori to finally chop the vegetables while he took care of the broth. There were many familiar ingredients in this fantasy world, but there were also some very strange foods. Monster meat was used for the meal, which actually turned out to be very nutritious. There was no shortage of food in this world, and so people liked to cook something new. Peeling a large carrot, Tori realized that his father was using it for vegetable soup. In the short time that Tori had lived in this world, he had already learned to be good at cooking recipes. Tori often thought back to his past life, where of course there was no time for careful cooking. And so now he could fill in the gaps in his knowledge of cooking. In his past life, Tori had only at rare moments in his life attempted to cook something delicious on his own. There was certainly an interest in cooking, but there was too little time for it. And so most often the results of efforts in the kitchen were not very good. All the blame was busy at work, which absorbed all the free time. Continuing to recall his past life, Tori carefully grilled a piece of fresh meat. Tori actually enjoyed working in the kitchen, for these boring and simple tasks were something he enjoyed. And his father often joked and told stories while telling him how to do the job better. Abel announced that very soon breakfast would be ready, which surprised his wife and daughter. Her father asked Tori not to worry and to concentrate on cooking. Each time he did better, and Tori learned to enjoy the daily chores in the kitchen. At the same time, it was nice that all his family always helped and supported him. Such kind treatment he had not received in his previous life, working in an office, and now it was completely different. Tori was really trying hard preparing different dishes and now promised that everything would be finished within 5 minutes. At the same time, Tori advised Sister Letty to keep up. This kind competition in the kitchen allowed for the best productivity as well as perfecting the quality of cooking. At the same time, Tori tried to work in moderation, for his fear of fatigue never went away. Soon everything was ready and the whole family was enjoying a fresh breakfast. Such a warm environment made Tori happy. This family was indeed very friendly. And Tori wanted to do what he really liked in this environment. So this world gave him a new chance and he needed to take advantage of it. After breakfast, the family went about their business. Tori washed all the dishes and realized that soon he would have to receive customers. Father Abel continued cooking and asked Tori to help with the customers, as they were expecting many hungry people. Tori promised his father that he would be ready as soon as he set out clean plates. The first visitor to the inn was Mikhail. The young handsome fellow greeted Tori and remarked how beautiful the morning was. Mikhail inquired how Tori was feeling. There were no particular problems to worry about, and Tori admitted that if it weren't for his morning work, he would have been able to sleep a little more. Michael only laughed and said that Tori did not change and could break the world record for sleep duration. Mikhail was an ordinary aristocrat in this world, and this guy was really like some kind of prince. Tori scrutinized the morning guest and said that Mikhail looked very good for such an early time. Mikhail explained that he woke up very early and groomed himself carefully to make his appearance more presentable. Such vigor was indeed impressive, and Tori could only envy the fellow, for he himself could hardly wake up so early. The only reason why an aristocrat of such a high class would stop at this quite ordinary inn was because he really liked the dishes, and especially those prepared by Tori using recipes from his past life. In general, everything happened by chance and Mikhail was just passing by one day and for some reason decided to look in the inn. Such a whim of fate allowed this aristocrat to get acquainted with Tori's culinary talents. After that, Mikhail fell in love with the rest of the cuisine of this place and stayed here for a long time. Today's breakfast was prepared by his father and Mikhail was already looking forward to another delicious dish. Besides delicious food, Michael liked to be in the company of two beautiful girls, Shira and Letty. Especially Michael showed warm feelings for his sister Tori and at every opportunity gave her a lot of compliments. This attitude liked and Letty herself, and she was very pleased with the attention from the aristocrat. Tori thought at such moments, when Michael was especially attentive to Letty, that it would be nice if their sister would be related to aristocrats. After all, then it would be possible not to work at all and live only for fun and pleasure. But it was strange that Michael showed interest not only in Letty, but also in Shira. And the young aristocrat wasn't pretending at all when he kissed his mother's hand. But Shira herself found such moments amusing because she was pleased by the way Abel became jealous. And if the husband is jealous, it means their feelings have not yet faded. Michael smelled a sour aroma coming from the kitchen and asked if it was tomatoes. Tori praised the aristocrat for his keen sense of smell and said that the vegetable soup is supplemented with the freshest tomatoes and cabbage. And today's breakfast of the day is cabbage rolls in tomato sauce. Michael was pleased with the tasty dish and is always rewarded all indiscriminately with numerous compliments. And the author of cabbage rolls called the genius of cooking, worthy of a monument in the city center. Michael asked Tori to serve him breakfast as soon as possible and to add delicious bread and sweet red wine. Tori promised to fulfill the instructions in a minute and motioned for the aristocrat to take a table. Tori found Michael's behavior amusing, for this man seemed unconventional and showed very interesting emotions. What was most surprising about Michael's behavior was that he used a personal tablecloth and personal cutlery. This was something Tori had never seen in his previous life or in this new world. Michael certainly attracted the attention of the other visitors, but no one dared to say anything to the aristocrat. As a result, his private table looked out of place, as if it had been brought from a high-class restaurant. Mikhail liked to do everything in his own way, but it did not cause any problems, so everyone just watched the aristocrat's actions with interest. In fact, despite his status, Michael was a kind and simple man. When there were not enough seats at the tables, Michael gladly offered the guests of the inn to sit next to him and did not feel any discontent. That's why everybody loved Mikhail and let him do whatever he wanted in the inn. His father also loved Michael, except for those moments when the aristocrat showed signs of attention to Sheer. Tori finally brought breakfast to Michael and apologized for the wait. The young aristocrat was delighted by the aroma of fresh tomatoes and the sight of black warm bread. Tori offered to fill his glass with wine and noticed the brand of high-class wine that Michael himself was also buying. Tori remembered how he had once had the opportunity to take a sip of such wine, and then he had been struck by the incredibly mild flavor of this expensive drink. The taste of such wine made Tori wonder if he had ever drunk real wine in his past life, because all those wines he bought in stores were much worse. The price of such a good wine in this fantasy world was as high as several tens of gold coins. Therefore, one must be careful not to accidentally spill even a drop of this expensive drink. Michael thanked for the service and remarked that Tori was doing an excellent job. The young aristocrat explained that Tori seemed like a completely different person compared to when they first met. And now Tori had become a true master at serving the inn's customers. Mikhail asked Tori to always serve his table. Tori replied that anyone can learn to pour expensive wine neatly and speak politely. The main thing is to want to do it. Michael said that with such abilities, Tori could now work as a waiter in any high-class restaurant. But Tori explained that it was not a good idea for him, because he planned to inherit the inn in the future. Oh, and it's much more convenient to work at home than to feel a huge responsibility in someone else's establishment. Even in an expensive restaurant, you need to constantly show good manners and special elegance. Mikhail agreed with such arguments, but still offered his recommendations, which, if desired, will allow you to get a job in any high-paying establishment. Tori thanked him for the good advice and promised that he would keep it in mind. At the same time, Tori did not understand why the young aristocrat suddenly made such a suggestion, since Mikhail always ate only at this inn. The young aristocrat then said that he would enjoy the splendid cabbage rolls. Michael was quite right. The flavor of the fine dishes always caused admiration among all the visitors of the inn. And by the quality of cooking and products used, this institution was not inferior to expensive restaurants. Michael praised the dish for the softness of the cabbage and the wonderful sour flavor of the tomatoes used to make the sauce. The meat was incredibly tender and literally melted in the mouth. All the ingredients perfectly combined and gave a real pleasure to the young aristocrat. Michael admitted that he cannot express in words all the emotions from such a delicious meal. Tori promised to tell his father that Michael liked his dish very much. After all, the most valuable thing for any chef is the gratitude of customers. Michael could easily visit the most expensive restaurants and eat any exquisite dishes. But thanks to Abel's abilities and Tori's help, the young aristocrat became a regular customer of the inn. And this added to the image of their modest establishment. Many people saw Michael in the Bird Tavern and also became regular customers. All this increased the profits of the establishment and made his father's work more productive. Gradually, the inn began to fill with customers. And some customers came even earlier than usual. Letty assumed that people smelled the aromatic tomatoes and therefore hurried to taste the new dish. An attractive guy wished to rent a room for the night, and Letty immediately hurried to be at the reception. The girl left the worries of the kitchen and customer service to her brother and mother, as she was eager to chat with the new guest. Tori realized that wanting to socialize was not the only reason for Letty to be at the front desk. For the job, there was very simple. All she had to do was ask a customer for a simple form, point out a vacant room, and then hand out a key. It couldn't get any simpler than that. Shira asked Tori to take care of the tables that were on the far side of the room, and she would take care of the others in the meantime. Tori immediately resented it, because now he had to walk a lot from the kitchen to the customers. Mom asked him not to be so unhealthy and try to overcome his natural laziness. Orders were really a lot, and Shira reminded that you can't leave customers dissatisfied, because the image of the establishment depends on it. Tori decided to work more productively to get things done as soon as possible, because if you try to procrastinate, it will all drag on and be tedious. There were more and more visitors, and it was impossible to let down his parents, because they hoped that someday their son will continue their business. Tori, serving the customers of the inn, noticed the trio of adventurers entering and greeted the familiar guests. Swordsman Ralph, sorceress Helmina, and archer Sik were on the same team and always walked together. Their noisy group always attracted attention, and they immediately inquired about what they could have for breakfast today. Tori suggested they try cabbage rolls with meat in a flavorful tomato sauce. It all goes great with fresh bread. Ralph, Helmina, and Sik came from one distant village, and they were true friends. They also often lived at the inn from time to time, and always gave the people around them a rowdy atmosphere with lots of different jokes. Usually there were various disagreements among the adventurers even within the team, let alone between different groups. But this team was very friendly and always acted as one. Helmina and Sik ordered cabbage rolls with meat, and Ralph decided to study the menu and choose something else. Tori immediately passed the order to his father, who continued to labor in the kitchen. Helmina enjoyed the flavor of the dish and asked why Ralph was so foolish to refuse the cabbage rolls. Sik also couldn't resist the temptation to make a joke of his friend, and their whole company was already habitually making noise. Soon Tori brought the ordered portions, and Helmina immediately began to taste the delicious dish. Ralph watched his friends enjoy the food, felt irritated, because he himself refused such a flavorful dish. Ralph was very hungry and felt strong cramps in his stomach. Tori finally brought a portion of vegetable soup for Ralph, as well as fresh meat sausages. Tori explained that he personally prepared it with his father, and it should be very tasty. Ralph immediately began devouring the flavorful soup and promised to thank Abel later for such a meal. Tori was happy that his cooking abilities were increasingly being recognized, although this time was the first time he was making sausages. Ralph asked if by chance there were any beefsteaks with spicy mayonnaise in the kitchen today. Tori gave Ralph a saddened look and explained that there was no time to deal with such a dish today. Beefsteak is a specialty from the world where Tori used to live. Such meat is served with spicy mayonnaise and various seasonings that alas do not exist in this magical world. Tori remembered many recipes from his past life while working in the kitchen. So sometimes he cooked different dishes that were unfamiliar to the people of this world. Tori, like Michael, often socialized with Ralph and his team. During their acquaintance, Ralph turned into a real fan of Tori's culinary abilities and was always waiting for some tasty novelties. The whole trio of adventurers enjoyed the food, and they really became regular customers of the inn just because of their taste preferences. Tori, on the other hand, decided that he should start making up his own dishes and experiment with different ingredients more often. Ralph began to ask Tori to cook a fine beef steak for him, because it was the best thing he had ever eaten in his life. Tori realized that Ralph was purposely trying to appear charming to get his way. Well, if you start making steaks too early in the morning, you'll have to sacrifice your precious sleep, and you can't have that. The only time you can do extra meals is at night or in the evening. But you don't really want to overdo it. Tori still promised Ralph to cook meat steaks for him, but only another time when he had time. Ralph was glad to hear this and hoped for a speedy rendezvous with his favorite dish. But Hilmina and Shin realized that Tori was usually too busy and it was unlikely that Ralph would soon get his treat. Ralph had always been a very cheerful guy and it looked like a lot of fun. But wasting time on just one table was unforgivable. Tori noticed how the number of visitors quickly increased, and so he had to hurry. The respected and mature dwarf began to demand that a good and cold beer be brought to him as soon as possible. Sebastian was different from all the other visitors in his appearance, and he was also very fond of beer as well. Sebastian explained that he was running out of time and would soon be a deserted man. Tori promised to bring a cold beer quickly and asked him to behave with a little more restraint and not to worry. The appearance of this stout elf with a beard reminded Tori of fantasy heroes from games and popular manga, and it was interesting to observe his behavior. Tori himself and his family, as well as Michael and Ralph, were ordinary people. But there were also many different kinds of creatures living in this world. There were dwarves and elves, and they were only a small part of the magical creatures that could be found in this fantasy world. Initially, Tori felt a sense of excitement, then being in the company of such creatures. But then he quickly got used to it and now treats them as normal people. So one can get used to anything and can exist calmly with any creatures. Suggestion continued to loudly demand beer. Already enjoying the very process of his shouting, and Tori had to speed up as much as possible to appease the noxious visitor. The elf girl immediately reprimanded the beer-hungry old man and asked him not to express his desire to get drunk so vividly. But Sebastian only snapped back, saying that he did not intend to follow the orders of a girl whose dress covered almost nothing. The girl immediately reminded him to speak softly in public, and especially with the opposite sex. The noisy old man realized his mistake and apologized, for indeed elven ears are too sensitive to irritation. Tori recalled how in various games and novels, different fantasy creatures almost always disliked each other. Therefore, frequent battles and other confrontations were described, but in this world, things were a bit different. Sebastian was just a reminder of how much he liked to drink alcohol. And if he didn't drink at least a beer, he would dry up like a desert. Sebastian and the elf Camille ended up arguing about the benefits of food versus alcohol. In fact, the elderly dwarf called eating vegetables the silliest thing ever. Camille was tired of Sebastian's provocations and offered to settle the matter wisely. At that moment, Tori returned with a huge mug of cold beer and suggested that the guests calm down. All of Sebastian's aggression immediately dissolved in the cold beer, and he no longer accused anyone of anything. Camille thanked Tori for showing up just in time to stop this conflict. Tori decided that there are always those people, even regardless of race, who are just not compatible, and they are better off not crossing paths at all. Tori had finally waited until the heavy flow of visitors had ended. And now it was possible to just sit down without annoying anyone and rest a bit. Such moments Tori valued the most in his work, because he could rest and relax. This life was very different from his previous world, where everything was much stricter and all office workers strictly followed the schedule, and if they violated it, they received fines. At the moment, the only people left in the inn were the innkeepers, who were not as noisy as the other visitors. After all, They just wanted to rest and had rented rooms for that purpose. Also left at their table were the adventurers Helmina and her friends. The adventure team was holding something like a meeting. The topic of discussion was what assignments they would be best to take on. Ralph suggested doing something serious since he was tired of gathering healing herbs. Shin and Helmina agreed after a short thought and decided that it would be nice to have a change of scenery and do an interesting task, especially since they had already managed to raise enough money to make supplies. Tori watched the team of adventurers without much interest and only wondered how long the meeting would last. Helmina suggested that they start by checking their equipment to decide which tools they should take with them first, and already then choose a suitable guild assignment. To Tori's surprise, the meeting of the group of adventurers ended rather quickly. She wondered what adventurers really looked like, and if it was really like what Tori knew from games and various novels. There, brave heroes always used swords, magic staffs, bows, and other weapons. In his past life, Tori was really very fond of stories about adventurers. Back then, he read a lot of stories about incredible adventures and also played a variety of computer games. Tori himself had always dreamed of such adventures and thought he was ready to become one of the adventurers. But now all this was not fantasy, but the real life of the world where he found himself. And things looked much more difficult than in games or stories. Tori thought it would be nice if Helmina and her friends didn't resent him for watching them so closely. But the well-meaning adventurers didn't mind the attention and promised that as soon as they completed their new task, they would definitely return to the inn. And then they would celebrate their victory and bring Tori to them. Helmina wished all the best and asked Tori not to be sad in parting. This hospitable inn had always been a place where all sorts of interesting people gathered. Tori often had to deal with interesting visitors because her job required her to serve everyone indiscriminately. But there was nothing wrong with that, although he sometimes had to worry and get tired of such socializing. Letty noticed how Tori was practically falling asleep for nothing to do and reminded her not to do that. And since there weren't too many visitors in the establishment right now, Tori could be the porter in her place. The young dreamer gladly agreed to fill in for his energetic sister, because behind the counter he could be quiet. Suddenly, a man in powerful armor entered the inn and everyone instantly began whispering about the new visitor. Tori also paid attention to the strange man and prepared for the standard conversation. Tori wished good morning to the stranger and asked how he could help. The stranger answered nothing and only stared at Tori strangely. The young innkeeper didn't know how to react and asked the stranger if he was always so silent when he came to an establishment. After pausing for a moment, the armored stranger went to the far side of the hall and approached one of the tables. Tori asked the strange gentleman where he had gone, since they had discussed nothing. The formidable warrior approached one visitor and gave the guy a worried look. But the armored warrior only picked up the wallet that had fallen to the floor and politely handed it to the owner. The lad thanked the warrior for his observation. And Tori was surprised at this behavior of the silent master. In this world, if there are disagreements or duels between different nobles, and also if it is necessary to escort traders or guard high-ranking people, always turn to the help of such mercenary warriors. As a result, the mercenary Urgent had been staying at the inn for a few days now, but it was still unclear if the man was a man or all female. Tori knew that usually mercenaries fought against humans following the orders of those who paid them. But apparently Urgent also fight monsters. One of the visitors inquired about the current specialties, and Tori advised him to try cabbage rolls with meat in tomato sauce. The hungry guy agreed, and Tori asked Urgent if he would be ordering anything from the food. There was no reply as usual from the mercenary. It was because of the absolute silence that it was not clear what gender this mysterious mercenary actually was. During the entire time he was in the hotel, Urgent never spoke to anyone. In addition, this man always wears armor, which added even more mystery. Tori hoped every day that the mysterious mercenary would still decide to talk. But as usual, Urgent used gestures and now pointed to the dish of the guy next to him, confirming his order. Tori understood the strange customer's desire and asked if Urgent would like bread as a supplement. The armored mercenary nodded approvingly, and at least in this, he acted consistently. Gradually, Tori had grown accustomed to this behavior of Urgent's and had given up hope of hearing his voice. Initially, it was even very scary to be around this mercenary. After all, such warriors were famous for their cruelty, but Urgent did not show any hostility. A small bird landed on the armored knight's shoulder and made him visibly worried. Such a reaction surprised Tori, and it was strange whether Urgent hadn't seen such animals before. Abel, meanwhile, had already handled the dishes and called his son to pick up the finished orders. Letty volunteered to help Tori and wanted to take the plate of food to the mysterious warrior herself. It was noticeable that the girl was also very interested in this silent innkeeper. Letty, carefully arranging the plates, said that today's cabbage rolls are especially good with tomato sauce. And father had tried very hard to prepare them and used the freshest products. The girl wished her a pleasant appetite, and Urgent nodded instead of answering. Letty was in no hurry to go back to the kitchen, and that made the mercenary not start the meal. Letty suggested that Urgent should not be shy and taste the fine dish. Tori understood the whole cunning scheme of his energetic sister. It became clear that he really wanted to see the face of the mysterious warrior. This is what Urgent himself also realized, and was in no hurry to please Letty. The mercenary just silently looked at the surprised girl and apparently mentally tried to send her away. After a short pause, the mercenary still took the cutlery, and to everyone's surprise began to carefully cut the cabbage roll. Tori and Letty waited as if mesmerized for the moment when this mysterious man finally took off his helmet. But after a minute, the young people felt disappointed because the mercenary did a very tricky thing and only slightly lifted his helmet to enjoy the dish. The mysterious man ate very cleverly without letting anyone see his face. Letty asked if Urgent was satisfied with the meal, to which she received an approving nod. The girl promised to tell her father that he liked his dish very much. Tori once again marveled at how inventive his sister is, who can come up with anything right on the fly. His father was still busy cooking, his mother was meticulously washing the dishes, and his sister was once again hosting guests at the reception desk. Tori decided that as long as almost all the tables were free, then he'd better get busy and clean the house and check the available rooms at the inn. But before that, there was still a little unfinished business. And since there are still some visitors who didn't wake up in time for breakfast, it's necessary to wake up those who have been sleeping for too long. Of course, it was not necessary to wake up the visitors. After all, it was completely their fault for not waking up on time. But Tori really wanted everyone to try his father's delicious dish while it was still available. The innkeepers had all paid for their meals in advance, and it would be disrespectful to them to deprive them of breakfast. The first room Tori knocked on was occupied by Natalia. From her room always came a beautiful floral scent, which Tori liked very much. Tori cautiously entered the room and informed the girl that it was long past breakfast time. But Natalia, judging by the amount of alcohol she had drunk, she wasn't feeling well and wanted to sleep further. Tori reminded her that Natalia had not eaten breakfast for several days in a row and rarely left the room. But all Tori's entreaties did not help to influence the girl, and he felt uncomfortable to be in the room. Overcoming fatigue and sleepiness, Natalia still greeted the caring guy, but clearly did not hurry to get out of bed. Tori only now noticed what a terrible mess the room was. Tori once again reminded the girl that it was long past morning and time for breakfast. But Natalia replied that she was very sleepy, because she had just returned from work. Tori knew that the girl worked as a courtesan, but he tried to pretend that he didn't understand. Natalia lived mostly a night life, and during the day she almost always slept. Unlike normal people, Natalia practically never socialized with anyone. She was always very late for her night work. She was always like this and would only return in the early morning when everyone was still asleep. Tori began to tell the young courtesan about the necessity of proper nutrition, even though she had an unusual lifestyle. After all, a healthy body is the most important thing a person has. Natalia was all a little awake and agreed to Tori's entreaties. The too frank appearance of the young girl embarrassed the caring guy. Tori even felt his legs trembling, because seeing such a thing was not something he had expected at all. Tori muttered that Natalia had forgotten about her clothes. Tori shamefully averted his gaze from the attractive female body and asked why Natalia didn't wear pajamas. The girl confessed that she hated to sleep in clothes, because it does not allow you to feel free. Tori was delighted with the woman's body, because this girl was really beautiful. Usually such perfect forms are used to create beautiful sculptures and paint beautiful pictures. Natalia asked if Tori saw what he was interested in, but the guy pretended that he didn't understand anything and continued to look away. At the same time, Tori could barely restrain himself from wanting to scrutinize the beautiful female body again. But in that case, he would be considered a little pervert, and this could not be allowed. As if reading the young boy's thoughts, Natalia offered to come closer and explained that everything would be free for him. But Tori gathered his strength and refused the offer. The guy advised the girl to get up earlier so she could eat breakfast. Natalia laughed at Tori's embarrassment and then asked him if he could help her change. Tori replied that he was an innkeeper and could not do such things. At the same time, the guy praised himself for his self-control because he actually really wanted to help Natalia. Natalia admired the wonderful taste of cabbage rolls with meat, but still felt dead tired. Tori was convinced that the girl was not deceiving him, for she really did look very sleepy. Tori felt the urge to go to bed. In some ways, the guy understood Natalia because in his past life, he himself looked exactly the same, although he was engaged in other activities. Tori sincerely felt sorry for the young girl because such a lifestyle was not easy and required the expenditure of energy. Natalia was so sleepy that she didn't even notice the strap of her dress had slipped off. Letty hurried to correct her clothes and advised her to be more careful. Letty explained that it was better for Natalia not to stand out too much, because no one knew who might enter the inn. Tori appreciated her sister's concern for safety and the way she always saw many situations ahead of time. Shira announced to Tori and Letty the time to clean the rooms. By mid-morning, most of the innkeepers were mostly at work and so many rooms were left vacant, which was the best time to clean. Mom decided to join Letty in cleaning the second floor, while Tori was left with the third floor. Tori was not too happy, because he had to work alone and still on the same third floor. Mostly the third floor had beds for 2 people, and so such rooms were popular with couples in love. Yesterday, there were several such couples who clearly wished for privacy. Tori always felt that he was paid too little for such an unpleasant job. Letty noticed her brother's frustrated look and realized that Tori didn't want to do the cleaning on the third floor. The sister offered to switch roles, but Tori reminded her that there were a lot of women living on the second floor now, so it would be rude for him to clean there. So it would be better to leave things as they were. Letty agreed and wished Tori to get the job done soon. Shira thanked her son and reminded him of the need for coherence. Finished with the cleaning, Tori felt incredibly tired as the 2 rooms needed to be thoroughly cleaned after the couple's stay. After the rooms were cleaned, the dirty laundry was collected in special baskets, and then Tori had free time. The inn provided a laundry service, and for a fee, guests could leave their clothes to be washed. Different tenants had different attitudes towards the laundry service. Michael valued his expensive clothes and always asked that they be treated carefully and ironed with care. Helmina gave only her outer clothes to the laundry, as she was shy to show her underwear to anyone. Natalia was more open and handed in all her clothes indiscriminately and thanked for such a favor. Tori informed his mom that he had already managed and collected all the laundry for the laundry room. Shira praised the children for their work and suggested that they take a short break. Tori had been waiting for this moment and was glad for the rest. Shira might seem like a strict person, but she is actually an attentive and kind person. Compared to his mom's tasks, the work in his past life was just hellish. Tori had bad feelings every time he remembered that damned office, because he really died because of the work. The break was short and Tori decided not to waste it on bad memories. Letty asked him what he wanted to do. Tori, of course, wanted to sleep, and he frankly admitted it. From the look on Letty's face, she didn't expect such an answer. His sister reminded him that Tori was already up late, and then why go to bed again? It was clear that Letty just wanted to play a little, but Tori couldn't give up her favorite sleep. Letty pretended that she wasn't upset at all and said she was going to go visit her sister Ira. Tori was glad for the chance to be alone and always appreciated his sister's understanding. Drowsiness was increasing and Tori decided to hurry to his room to go to the splendid world of dreams as soon as possible. There was no need to worry about not being able to wake up on time, because even if Mom was busy, Letty would be sure to wake him up when the break was over. After reaching the room, Tori immediately collapsed on the bed and felt true pleasure. Tori's favorite place in this house was his room, or rather the soft mattress on the bed. It was very nice to relax and sink into the realm of Morpheus while feeling a rush of new energy. Any work should have normal breaks, because if you don't rest enough, what happened in the past life can happen. Moral and physical stress can easily kill even a young person. Tori gradually fell asleep and was glad that he was in a world where he could sleep while working. It was also great to work right at home, so that he didn't have to waste time and energy traveling. After all, in his previous life, he still had to travel a tedious distance to get to work. It wasn't long before Letty returned and had already started waking up her favorite brother. Tori didn't even realize whether he was asleep or not, for it seemed to him that only a few minutes had passed since he had gone to bed. But it was useless to argue, for the break was over. Letty explained that a large number of visitors were expected during lunch, and so Tori should help. Downstairs in the hall was indeed already noisy, and a lot of people appeared, so they had to move quickly between the kitchen and the customers. During lunch, most of the customers were people who worked nearby. Most often, they were carpenters or peddlers of goods, and various travelers and adventurers also came in. In fact, people did different things. Many workers in the city preferred to eat lunch close to their work, but there were also some who liked to take a walk during their break and eat at the usual eateries, which were many in different parts of the city. Most of the people who came to this inn were people who became fans of the dishes that Abel cooked. Era, a cute and cheerful girl, would always come in during lunch as well. This time Era asked to serve her roasted vegetables. Letty was friends with this girl and always enjoyed her visit. While chatting, the girls additionally took a break from work and discussed different news. One of the noisy visitors demanded to serve him an extra large portion of steak. Letty immediately explained that it would cost more than the usual portion. But the guy was clearly determined to save money on his meal somehow and asked for a discount from the establishment. Letty remained adamant and replied that no one would get special treatment. Letty explained that a real man should pay well to show his dignity. But the boy was clearly offended and nervously demanded to be given the biggest steak as soon as possible, because he was willing to pay the greedy innkeepers. Tori was carefully watching the guy's behavior and was already preparing to intervene. But so far the situation had not heated up that much. Letty handed the orders to her father, and Abel asked if the guy had offended his favorite daughter. Letty replied that everything was fine, and it was not worth paying attention to all sorts of idiots. The girl was really already used to the different behavior of visitors and rarely reacted to all sorts of antics. Abel praised his daughter for her stress tolerance and said that she was becoming a strong person. Letty explained that her mother and Era had not taught her how to behave with customers with bad behavior for a long time. Letty immediately ran off to take new orders, and Abel and Tori agreed that she was becoming a very strong girl who was doing a great job. Tori began to take care of the daily chores and monotonously arranged the plates. Michael greeted Tori and pointed out that there was a lot to do now. The young aristocrat advised Tori not to be discouraged by the hard work, for the visitors loved this inn very much. Tori agreed, for his family's prosperity depended on the number of customers. Michael was immediately noticed by the local children and greeted the dear nobleman. Tori noticed that the children always wait for Michael to appear and offer to sit down at the same table to chat. Michael himself was always happy to socialize with cheerful children. It gave him pleasure and positive emotions. Despite his high status, he sat quietly with ordinary children at the same table. He also treated the kids to various delicious dishes. Many children were actually from the orphanage, and they lacked a kind attitude, and thanks to Michael's kindness, they got everything they wanted. This time Michael offered the children delicious cabbage rolls, which he has already appreciated. The children did not mind any treat and were not fussy about food. Michael ordered food for all the children, and the scene was filled with kindness and generosity. Letty meanwhile was hurrying Tori, for they in there clearly did not have time to serve all the visitors. Lunchtime was the hardest and one had to work fast, running from the kitchen to the tables. But then everything would slow down and the whole family of the innkeeper would go into a more relaxed mode of work. Then there was the need to gather the dried laundry, which smelled fresh. Tori admitted that he didn't mind sleeping on fresh sheets now. And Letty immediately rebuked her brother for his eternal love of sleep. Her sister also told her how their father had complained about Tori because he wouldn't learn to cook new dishes. Tori actually had a little cooking experience from his past life, and he remembered recipes, but he didn't want to bother in the kitchen. After all, working in the kitchen was much more difficult than just delivering orders. So Tori had no desire to become a cook, even though he had promised to help. Letty, on the other hand, always asked him to let her try something new when a new culinary masterpiece was born in the kitchen. Father called Tori over and said that there was some request for him. The young lover of sleep immediately sensed that this request from his father would not be to his liking and some hard work would have to be done. Abel decided to explain what his request really was, but the adventurers team interrupted their conversation. Helmina apologized for them interrupting the father and son conversation, but explained. As it turned out, the team of adventurers had come not only to have lunch, but also to ask a question. Abel inquired as to what Helmina was really interested in. The adventurous girl explained that their team wants to take a mission to destroy the stone ants, but they are not confident in their abilities, and so they want to hear Abel's opinion. Tori intervened in the conversation and asked why Helmina would inquire about such a thing from his father. After all, he's just a regular food preparer, and what could he possibly understand about monsters? The entire trio of young adventurers stared at Tori in surprise. And then Helmina asked how Tori could not know that his father came from a family of adventurers. Abel confirmed that this was the case, but had long since retired and could only be considered a former adventurer. Tori thought it was all a ridiculous joke, for he had never heard anything like that in all his 12 years of life. But his father replied that he didn't think it was anything important, so he didn't tell. Abel then explained to the young adventurer that stone ants have a peculiarity of their own. They have a very tough exoskeleton that makes attacks ineffective. But still, these monsters have weaknesses in their eyes and joints. Therefore, you need to aim well and shoot at these places, and then you can easily defeat such an opponent. Shin sadly admitted that he will not succeed, because it is quite a difficult thing to do. Also, his father warned that there was a risk of acid in confronting the stone ants, so one should wear good armor. Though with so much experience with this team's battles, Abel ended up not recommending accepting such a mission. Helmina admitted that they had behaved lightly and didn't immediately look at the risks that would be during the mission. Therefore, they would rather take another mission that was less complicated. Abel offered to help the adventurers find a suitable mission, in return if they would bring him some ingredients from the trek. Helmina of course agreed and promised to bring a list of available quests. Tori was surprised at how much adventurers trusted his father, thus showing respect. As a result, it wasn't long before Abel picked a suitable assignment for the team of young adventurers to destroy the less dangerous vegetable monsters. Abel also asked them not to forget the herbal infusions. Tori still felt a strong sense of curiosity and ended up asking why his father even decided to become an innkeeper if he was so good as an adventurer. Father explained that being an adventurer means being constantly exposed to danger. It's high risk, albeit with high reward. Well, during a mission, people often die. And such a life has no meaning, because why would you want to get a lot of money if you end up dying in the clutches of a monster? Tori understood his father's thinking, because why risk your life if you can earn money in a safer way? Abel admitted that he enjoyed cooking delicious food much more than running through the forests and destroying dangerous monsters. Tori wondered why his father had chosen an inn after all, and not just a restaurant. Abel said that when he was an adventurer, he often spent the night in inns, so he likes this kind of environment. Yes, to create an environment for strangers that would remind them of home, because many travelers and adventurers who have not been home for a long time come here. And that's probably the main reason for the inn. Tori immediately mentally counted the regular customers who often stay here. Among them are the eccentric aristocrat Michael, a trio of young adventurers, the beautiful courtesan Natalia, and a very mysterious mercenary in armor. And it's wonderful to have such different people in one place. It was for this that he tried to create a cozy and calm atmosphere in his establishment, and also pleased everyone with delicious food. His father immediately hinted to Tori that it was time for him to become an experienced cook and fully help in the kitchen. But Tori parried his father's suggestion and quite sincerely replied that he liked being an ordinary clerk. Tori explained to his father that he actually liked to cook, but only when working in the kitchen he would have too little free time. Abel praised his son for his honest answer, but was still saddened that he was still without help in the kitchen. Tori asked his father if he was an adventurer, if his mother was an adventurer, or if she was some simple country girl he had met during his adventures. Letty was also interested in such a question and looked at her father carefully, waiting for an answer. Abel was indignant at the children's intrusiveness, for his daughter was already demanding to know how it really was. Tori immediately explained to his sister that his father was a famous adventurer and had a story to tell. Letty now understood why her father socialized so often with adventurers and easily found common themes with them. The innkeeper's young and curious daughter complained that her mother did not want to tell the details of their past life, and so her father must please his favorite daughter and explain how they met. Tori, of course, was also very much waiting for the father's story, but Abel acted more cunningly. His father promised to tell him about his past life only if Tori would become a cook and help in the kitchen. Letty immediately turned her attention to her brother and began to ask to become a cook. But Tori found a way out of the situation and explained that he did not need to listen to his father's story. In fact, it is enough to go to the Guild of Adventurers and there he will learn everything. Letty was happy about this easy opportunity and offered to go to the Adventurers Guild immediately. But Abel warned him that the guild could tell him anything he wanted to know and that it would not necessarily be true. The father gave in to the children's blackmail and decided to tell them. It turned out that their mother Shira was also an adventurer, and they traveled in the same group. The children were delighted with the news that their caring mom was a real adventurer. It was very hard to believe such a thing, since Shira didn't have any outstanding physical characteristics at all and looked like a quite ordinary girl. Tori asked if he understood correctly that mom was a sorceress. Abel praised his son for his insight and said that Shira was skillful in destroying monsters using various spells. Such news impressed and pleased the children. Letty immediately ran to call her mother, for her curiosity was piqued to the max. Shira indignantly asked her husband if he had really decided to tell the children about their past. Abel excused himself and explained that he thought it would be good for the children to know, especially since they were very interested in their past. Tori asked the parents why they had not told about their past before, because it is very interesting to know how they destroyed the monsters. Abel said that his own parents were also adventurers, but he didn't want his children to continue that tradition. Shira explained that she and her father had decided to live a quiet, peaceful life together, to simply own an inn and not risk their lives. And that is the kind of tranquility they wish for their children. Now it was clear why the parents hid the truth about their past lives. They just didn't want their children to become adventurers. Letty asked her brother if he had ever wanted to be an adventurer. But Tori replied sincerely that he never wanted that fate, because it was very difficult and dangerous. It turned out and Letty did not dream of such a thing, and now the young girl asked her mother what kind of sorceress she was. Judging from her parents' story, Shira was a master of effectively killing monsters. She killed monsters with the least amount of sorcery. Therefore, her abilities were valued very highly because it was very important for a sorceress to use her magical energy efficiently. Shira admitted that her supply of magical energy wasn't really too large, and so she had to learn how to use it effectively. Mom was even embarrassed about her life, and Letty asked why she had chosen Dad as her husband. Abel also wondered why his spouse had married him. An excited Shira told how her father protected her from monsters very often, and at some point she saw him as her hero, and so she fell in love. Judging from the look on her father's face, he was also embarrassed by his wife's revelation, but it was good to hear. The children watched with interest as their parents looked at each other lovingly, and it looked beautiful. Tori joked that Mom was really cute now and even blushed a lot. Shira got even more embarrassed and called Tori a little trickster and jokingly promised to punish him for asking such questions. After the frank conversations with her parents, it was time after lunch break. Usually this time was the most relaxing. There were no customers and there was complete silence. Tori, feeling weak, dreamily thought of his bed and decided that it would be nice to sleep. But suddenly Eri reminded him not to relax when standing at the front desk. Eri greeted the girl, although he was actually not very happy that his sleepiness had abruptly disappeared somewhere. But the perceptive girl understood everything at once and said that she knew about everything Tori was thinking. Era apologized for the disturbance and advised Tori to relax. The girl agreed with Tori's motives, for their family business required total immersion in the business. Era was often at the inn, and she was a good childhood friend of Letty, and the family of this beautiful girl also owns the inn, so she is aware of all the cases. Letty learned a lot from her friend, and it was from her that she learned her manners with difficult customers. Tori asked that if Era does not have any work now, she is so quietly strolling. The girl replied that it was her day off, and so she was resting as much as she could. Tori confessed his envy, because he has to work from the morning until late in the evening. Era only laughed at Tori's indignation and promised that she would try to rest for the two of them. At that moment, Shira and Letty came down from the second floor and greeted the guest. Era apologized for disturbing her, but Shira replied that there was free time now and they could chat. Letty was the most of such a meeting and offered her friend to play while there was free time. Era immediately reminded Letty that her home clothes were not too suitable for playing outside and it would be better to change. Tori realized that Era only came over to play with his sister, but unfortunately it was too rare, since there was only one day off for that. The girls began to discuss the latest news, while Tori continued to dream of a deep sleep. At that moment, a new customer entered the inn and inquired about the price for one night's lodging. Tori immediately brushed off all his sleepiness and replied that one bedroom including breakfast would cost 1,500 marillas. The visitor immediately agreed and started pulling out the required amount of coins. In this world, there were platinum, gold, silver, and copper coins, as well as pennies. All trade was based on the interplay of such coins, and prices were controlled by the government. The quantities and relationships of coins were clearly distributed, and everyone understood the prices in this world. At the same time, if we compare with the prices of other establishments, the prices of Tori's Inn were very small. That's why their establishment was very popular, because they could offer delicious food at a reasonable price for their lodging. Tori often thought that if he were the owner of the inn, he would be happy to increase the price and reduce the number of customers. Tori accepted the coins from the customer and offered to fill out a form and provide his details. Tori then thanked the customer for choosing their inn and explained that his room was located on the second floor at number 201. The young host also pointed out the stairs that were to be used to reach. Torum noticed that this man looked very much like a knight or adventurer, for he gave the impression that he was very confident. Meanwhile, a group of women had settled down at one of the tables and were merrily discussing their business. The women's chatter was hard for Tori to hear, but he watched them with interest. The young guy was certainly curious about what the women were talking about, but it was clear that it was impossible to find out the details, because it was impossible to leave from behind the counter. And in general, Tori could not just go and join the women's company. After all, he's a guy. Tori liked to hear the joyful female voices, and he could only imagine what they were talking about. It was so much easier to work that way when there was someone around who was cheerful and content. Tori remembered his past life where he almost always sat alone in his office, and if anyone was around, those people were just as depressed as he was. And if he had lived a similar life in his past life, perhaps he would feel much happier and not die of overwork. Era approached completely unnoticed, for Tori was too thoughtful and didn't notice it. The girl asked not to look at her so surprised as if she was the truest ghost, and then asked to follow her. As it turned out, Era offered Tori a piece of strawberry pie to try. The sleepy guy was surprised at such attention, and Era confessed that she really wanted him to try the pie. Courtesan Natalia and Sister Letty advised him to try the strawberry pie, because it is incredibly delicious. And since Tori is a food lover, he should appreciate this culinary masterpiece. Era hurriedly appreciated her pie, and taking a bite, Tori felt the pie soft inside and crispy on top. The sour strawberry flavor immediately hit Tori's taste buds, and he felt a real pleasure. Tori thanked Eri for the delicious strawberry pie and mentally appreciated the girl's culinary skills. Eri was very satisfied from the guy's reaction and admitted that she tried hard when she was making the pie. For this, she chose the best berries and carefully chose the baking temperature. Tori, to the girl's surprise, ate the pie very quickly and thanked her for the wonderful treat. Tori was not a big fan of sweets, but such a pie made him change his preferences. Era advised to eat such a pie in combination with juice. Tori decided that he would do that next time, although the pie was incredibly tasty without juice. Era announced that she had another portion. After the delicious strawberry pie, Tori felt very drowsy and fell asleep sitting on a chair. Such a relaxed state was something the young lad liked. This way of life was much easier than in the world he came here from. After all, it was always nice to have a good meal and some sleep while working. Having had a good night's sleep, Tori decided that since his mother was working at the reception desk today, he could take a quiet walk nearby. The trees everywhere were planted fairly evenly and functioned as a natural wall to create an area of privacy. Judging by the size of the trees, they were planted a long time ago, as it takes many years for trees to reach this thickness. Looking at the sturdy trunks of the trees and the shade provided by the extensive foliage, Tori decided that this was the perfect place to set up a hammock. After all, one would be able to sleep in it in a quiet place, and also in the fresh air. Tori quickly prepared the necessary tools as he knew very well how to build good houses. He had done such a thing in his past life, and the main thing he needed to take was a strong rope. The rope he found in the pantry looked good enough. Tori remembered how he had seen a great hammock at his friend's house in his previous life, and then he decided to make one just like it. All he needed that time was a rope and a good piece of cloth. Tori asked his mom for permission to borrow an old curtain and some rope from the pantry. Shira of course allowed it, but wondered why he needed the stuff. Tori explained what he needed it for, but Mom had never heard of a hammock. Shira asked for more details, but Tori replied that he didn't have time and she would see for herself. Tori quickly found a suitable place and began tying the rope around the thick tree trunk. It was not just a simple matter of putting a knot of rope through the loop at the other end, and then tightening it, and then it would be a perfect fixation, even with a lot of weight. Then a loop was made at the other end of the rope, into which a piece of cloth, or in this case curtains, was carefully threaded and tightened firmly. Thus the hammock was half ready. The same manipulation had to be repeated on the other side, but of course the balance had to be maintained. After a short manipulation of just 2 items, the perfect hammock was ready and it was time to test it. Tori was confident in the quality of his work. He had tied the ropes very tightly so it should not fall to the ground. Everything went perfectly and Tori enjoyed the pleasant feeling of weightlessness and relaxation. The seemingly unstable hammock swayed very smoothly in the wind. It felt like a kind of flight, and the hammock hugged his entire back and supported Tori's body. The young lad watched with satisfaction the vast blue sky that could be seen through the green branches of the trees, and it all gave peace of mind. Such a feeling was a true pleasure after hard work. Tori, he thought that if his former company had a hammock on which to take a nap at least once in a while, perhaps he would not have died of exhaustion. After all, lying in a hammock was very comfortable, and especially listening to the chirping of birds and the sound of the wind. Hearing a familiar metallic noise, Tori glanced towards the house and noticed the mercenary Urgent. It was impossible to tell what emotions the strange man was feeling, but it was obvious that he was in a hurry. Urgent then noticed Tori in the hammock and changed his mind about entering the house. Tori was surprised and wondered why Urgent was looking at him so intently and not leaving. It was impossible to understand what thoughts lurked beneath that helmet. Urgent thought for a while began to slowly approach Tori, and it looked quite threatening. Tori was once again convinced of how huge this mercenary was. His dimensions far exceeded his father's height. Tori asked how he could help Urgent, but the mysterious mercenary was silent as usual and only gently touched the child's body. Tori guessed that Urgent was interested in his hammock. The guy explained that it was a pretty sturdy invention and one could not worry about the hammock falling apart. Since the rope is of high quality and the weight of Tori himself is not too much. The mysterious mercenary gestured that he wanted to try to lie down on the hammock himself. Tori didn't immediately believe such a request and asked the mercenary again. Urgent nodded approvingly, and Tori wondered how this man could carry such a heavy thing on his head all the time. Tori explained to the mercenary that his heavy armor was unlikely to withstand a hammock. But if he took off his armor, he could lie in the hammock without any problem. But expectantly Urgent nodded his head negatively and of course did not agree to remove his armor. Tori thought that even if he could find a stronger rope, the wood itself might not be able to support the weight of the mercenary's massive armor. Tori decided that in his room, the case removes the armor and suggested to install a hammock right in the room. After all, every room has wall hooks, and they should be able to support the weight of the mercenary's body. Urgent jumped up on the spot and approvingly clenched his fists. Such an idea clearly appealed to the mysterious mercenary, and Tori decided that it was time to try this idea. Tori regretted a bit that his vacation was over, because he could have slept peacefully by now. But since he made a promise, he had to fulfill it. Tori advised the silent mercenary to go back to his room, and in the meantime, he would get everything he needed to set up the hammock. Tori promised to return soon, and then they would see each other in the room. Urgent, as usual, expressed his agreement with gestures and headed for the hammock in the trees. Tori immediately asked the mercenary not to jump on his hammock because he would break everything because of his weight. Urgent stopped and began to gesture to explain that he would soon return to his room and would not break the hammock. It wasn't long before Tori arrived at the mercenary's room and knocked. Immediately, heavy footsteps were heard and the door opened. Tori informed Urgent that he had brought everything he needed, and now a nice hammock could be made. The mercenary gestured an invitation into the room, and apparently never intended to start talking. Only now did the young creator of comfortable hammocks remember that he had never been in the mercenary's room before. But now it was noticeable that the room was completely clean. At the same time, there were no belongings, and it became clear that Urgent did not change clothes even when he was alone. The room was the simplest, and the only thing that interested Tori besides the weapon was a beautiful bouquet of flowers. It became kind of awkward to look at the room, and Tori decided that it wasn't nice. Urgent watched the guest carefully and waited for the hammock to appear. Tori suggested using the hooks on the right wall and the curtain rod, which was quite sturdy. But the dresser was in the way, and Tori asked him to move it. Urgent moved the heavy wooden dresser very easily, thus proving his strength. Tori laid out the necessary materials and quickly began to measure the rope and cloth. After spending a few more minutes, Tori displayed the finished hammock and offered the mysterious mercenary to evaluate the work. Tori was the first to lie down on the hammock and decided that the construction was quite sturdy. However, he advised the mercenary not to jump on the hammock or put any heavy objects on it. The formidable mercenary looked like a satisfied child who got a new toy, and it was clear that Urgent was happy with the hammock. Tori was about to go to the courtyard. After all, the mercenary would not remove his armor in his presence anyway. Tori was satisfied that he was able to help the man get positive emotions, even spending his time to do so. But suddenly Urgent suggested that Tori take money for his help. The leather pouch contained gold and silver coins. Tori was surprised and asked if it was payment for making the hammock. The coins were too much for such a job, but the mysterious Urgent gestured for him to take the money as a thank you. Tori replied that he couldn't accept it. After all, he wasn't making the hammock for money, but Urgent turned around not wanting to take the coins. It turned out the mysterious mercenary decided to write something. A moment later, Tori read the written text. Urgent expressed his gratitude for creating the hammock, and also explained that sometimes he can now sleep outside. And this money is worth this kind of work, so Tori should accept it. For the people of this world, such a thing as a hammock was unfamiliar, because nothing like it had ever existed. Therefore, Urgent was so surprised by the invention, which helped to rest comfortably. Apparently because of this, the mysterious mercenary decided to repay with such a generous sum, so appreciated the unfamiliar knowledge. Tori decided that it was too much, because he was not an inventor at all, but a very ordinary guy. Feeling awkward, Tori tried to explain that it was too much coin. The young hammock creator agreed to only take 3 silver coins for the materials and time spent. And even that would be more than enough. Tori decided that if he took too many coins, he would feel guilty and it would disturb his peaceful sleep. But the mysterious mercenary disagreed and began to show in every way possible that Tori should take all the money. The guy could not afford it and offered to do Urgent a favor as payment. The mercenary was to help show the hammock to all the other people and thus make this contraption popular. Urgent agreed to take the money and gestured that he agreed to help Tori. In parting, Tori wished Urgent a good night's rest and reminded him that if he needed anything, he could call him anytime. As Tori descended the stairs, he heard the silent mercenary removing his heavy armor and realized that Urgent would soon be sleeping in a hammock. At this moment, Tori felt a strong desire to peek into the room and finally see this mysterious man without a helmet and find out whether he was a woman or a man. But this could not be done, for the privacy of the guests was paramount. It was also dangerous, for one could not predict the reaction of an experienced mercenary to such an invasion of privacy. Tori decided to return to the courtyard and finally take a nap in the hammock while there was still free time. But as it turned out, he had already been beaten to it and the hammock was occupied. Tori asked why Natalia had taken his place. The courtesan explained that she had seen this beautiful hammock in the courtyard and had decided to rest as she thought it was meant for guests. Tori tried to explain that he had made the hammock for himself and wanted to rest. But Natalia had no intention of giving up the space and only promised that she would let Tori use it, but only on her terms. The enchanting courtesan tried to pull Tori closer to her and suggested that they sleep together in a hammock because it would be much more comfortable and pleasant. Tori desperately resisted and Natalia was indignant that it was so bad to sleep together with her. The forces were unequal, and Tori was clearly losing to the girl's clinging hands. After arguing with the courtesan Natalia, Tori was tired and returned to his room. He wanted to sleep, as he had not been able to rest during the break. But as soon as Tori laid down on his bed and felt relaxed, his father immediately called him. Abel informed him that he was going grocery shopping and so Tori should help. The vacation was over before it had even begun, but for Tori, going grocery shopping was much easier than doing the tedious cleaning. But when it turned out that his father wanted to buy a lot of groceries, Tori thought about what was really easier to do. Era, noticing Abel going shopping, asked her to take her along since she needed to buy something too. Letty also wanted to join her friend, but Shira reminded her daughter of her job. Letty had to help in the laundry room where a lot of laundry was piling up. The little girl immediately became indignant and reminded her that she had recently rewashed everything. Shira reminded her that there was still more family laundry left to do, since they were only dealing with laundry from the guest rooms. Abel noticed how upset her daughter was and promised to buy her favorite fruit to make her upset. Letty was excited and agreed to help her mom so she could have tasty treats with everyone afterward. Abel said it was now safe to go and Tori advised her to hurry before Letty changed her mind. After briefly packing, Tori, Abel, and Era set off on their journey to Rubble's Market. Tori liked just serenely watching the street, but he also liked to walk somewhere and learn something new. It was nice to just walk along the stone sidewalk and admire the view around him. Tori liked to be among the hustle and bustle of the city center where you could see interesting people. There were many different stores and market stalls all around, from which could be heard the noisy arguments of merchants and customers. The main street of the city never quieted down, and even at night you could find a whole bunch of people here. In this market, you could find anything from clothes and shoes to any kind of food. There were also blacksmith shops and weapon shops here that were frequented by adventurers. Era reminded them that they needed groceries and pointed in the right direction, for Tori hesitated and headed in the other direction altogether. The main market was on a road that branched off the main street. The stores were neatly built and everything looked very well laid out. Rubble is a relatively small town, but it is surrounded by many villages and towns of various sizes. Villagers come to this market and sell their vegetables, so the freshest produce could be found here. Tori and Era finally found Abel, who was already starting to worry because he thought he had lost his children. It turned out they were on time and there was a lot of food in the market. Tori immediately noticed some goods that he had never seen before, even though he had been to this market quite often. Compared to Tori's homeworld, the flora and fauna of this magic world was much more diverse. Not to mention monsters, one could always find something unique with a completely unique flavor here. It was always interesting and informative. Tori asked his father what he would choose for his kitchen this time. Abel was going to make a flavorful soup and decided to buy fat cream, fresh turnips and black mushrooms, and of course he should not forget about meat. Abel was not sure what kind of meat to buy. Tori immediately realized that his father's thoughts would take some time. This was often the case, because his father was very responsible about the choice of ingredients. Era, on the other hand, was going to buy some fragrant spices and fresh fruits, as well as salad greens. Such purchases could not take much time, so the girl decided to follow Abel for the time being. He, in turn, was going to visit the local butcher first. The local meat merchant Carnes was famous for his goods throughout the city. This skillful businessman always maintained a high quality of goods and offered different kinds of meat. Abel asked what Carnes could recommend to him. The merchant reminded him, as always, that his goods were the best and offered to inspect the fresh meat. Carnes offered to buy monster meat, black buffalo, which was especially tasty after careful cooking. Abel was interested in the offer and thought about the best way to cook such meat. Tori noticed how big the pieces of meat were, and they looked quite appetizing. Black buffaloes are beasts like cattle. But compared to the common cow, these wild creatures had stronger and more elastic muscles. The meat of black buffalo was very juicy, and despite its relative costliness, such meat was very popular. And black buffalo were often trophies for adventurers. It was also possible to purchase the meat of Digfan, a kind of pig-like creature of which Tori knew little. Abel pondered over the choice, and Tori decided to speed up the process as he didn't want to waste any time at all. Tori said that he should get the meat of the Difgagus as he had never tasted it before. Father agreed and decided that it would be great to try something new. Tori remembered how in his past life he had of course eaten regular pork, and it would be interesting to compare the taste with this monster meat. Era said that her inn mainly served dishes made of black buffalo meat. Abel realized that this was another reason to buy Difgan meat and so attract customers at the expense of the new dish. Carnes accepted the order and asked the assistant's son to prepare the meat for sale. The butcher's son Carlo greeted Tori and Era and asked if they were working hard. In fact, Carlo was glad to be able to talk to Era, whom he liked very much. Carlo had always helped his father and was the same age as Era. This guy was friendly and pleasant to be around. Tori often went to Mr. Carnes's butcher shop, and so he managed to become friends with Carlo. Tori told him that they would probably make a delicious stew or steaks out of the meat today. Carlo told him how tasty the meat of Difgaga is and that it would be suitable for any dish as it is very tender and juicy. Carlo's story made Tori feel even more hungry, and now he had to hurry home. Abel said that it was time to go and we should end the chatter. Carnes advised Carlo to continue working, and the boy said goodbye to Tori until next time. Tori enjoyed chatting with Carlo, but now it was really time to go. Tori watched with interest for a few more minutes as his buddy went to work, because it was interesting how he could handle large pieces of meat with a huge knife. Tori was always amazed at how much Carlo concentrated while working. It was hard to believe that this was the same guy who a few minutes ago looked like an ordinary unemployed kid. Tori said that Carlo was completely different when he was cutting meat. Era didn't hesitate to agree with such an observation. Because of this, Tori remembered a buddy from his past life. That guy also changed drastically while working and became like a robot concentrating on a task. But when just socializing, he was a friendly and cheerful person. Tori always admired such people because they were very interesting to watch. He himself was not able to readjust so quickly and was prone to drowsiness and laziness. Era advised Tori to learn from Carlo how to approach his work, because he was very focused and responsible. But Tori admitted that his laziness only helps him in his work, because he is always in a hurry to get the job done faster so that he can rest sooner. Era replied that Tori is the most stubborn person she knows. After buying meat, Abel decided to buy vegetables and of course mushrooms, which he had wanted for a long time. Abel noticed a good choice in one store. Tori agreed with his father's choice, because the food looked really fresh. Father, on the other hand, decided to ask the children for their opinions. Abel inquired which of the two carols was fresher. The carol was a vegetable something akin to a cabbage. The main difference was its purple color and softer texture. This vegetable was a unique plant of this world and was widely used in cooking. Tori asked his father to show him the underside of the vegetable, and as it turned out, the difference was immediately noticeable. Tori and Era simultaneously determined that the vegetable on the left was fresher. Hart, the vegetable vendor's son, explained that the whiter the stem of the carolo, the more flavorful it is. Therefore, it is very important to check the condition of the stem before buying the vegetable. Moreover, if the broken off leaves develop black spots, it is a clear sign of a stale product. Hart knew a lot about vegetables from his father and spent a lot of time helping in the store. Like Carlo, this guy was the same age as Era or Tori, and that allowed for normal communication. Abel was happy to learn new things about products and always tried to pass on his knowledge to Tori. His father often asked different questions about products and conducted something like an exam when they visited the market. Father asked how to know the freshness of turnips. But Tori did not have time to answer the question, for Hart immediately intervened, showing his knowledge. It turned out that if the surface of the turnip is smooth and slippery and there are no cracks on it, then it is good. In addition, turnips with finer leaves are much softer and tastier. Abel praised Hart for his excellent knowledge, but explained that he wanted to test his son's knowledge. Hart was immediately embarrassed and apologized for his intrusiveness. Hart explained that when he hears questions about vegetables, he reflexively starts answering them. Tori thought that apparently it's not easy to remember so much information about vegetables, since Hart is still a child. Abel asked Hart not to worry about it, because in the future he would need it and become a good merchant like his father. Hart confessed that since his birth his life has been connected with vegetables and he knows everything about them. Tori was surprised at this boy's strange upbringing, even though his whole family was quite eccentric. Abel asked that next time Hart behave more restrained when he tests Tori's knowledge. Hart promised that he would, though it clearly didn't please him and made him sad. His father decided to test Tori's knowledge of mushrooms and asked what the difference was between the two trays of mushrooms. Tori decided that they were no difference at all, but Era noticed that the mushrooms were actually of different species. Era and Tori started to argue, and Abel reminded them that mushrooms come in different species, and there are so many of them. This question was really very complicated, and so Abel covered Hart's mouth, so he couldn't prompt. Tori realized that Hart would find any differences right away, but he would have to study the mushrooms carefully to find the difference. It was hard to tell the differences since they were very similar. Only Era could notice the difference in the shade of gray. But that turned out to be a mistake, for the shade was just a play of light, and Era realized that it was not an indicator. Hart broke free from Abel's grasp and accused Tori of being ignorant of mushrooms. Abel immediately tried to calm Hart down so he couldn't interfere with the exam. Hope for help immediately vanished, and Tori and Era continued to scrutinize the mushrooms, trying to spot any differences. The mushrooms were all smooth to the touch. There was no difference between the caps and stems. Tori asked Era if she had any guesses. Father realized that this task was too difficult to solve and still decided to give Hart a chance to show his knowledge. Hart immediately explained that you have to look under the cap of the mushroom. And if the gills of the mushroom are slightly curved, it is a white mushroom. And if they go straight, then it is a mushroom prim. Tori and Era immediately understood everything and really found the differences. Noticing it was very difficult, and it is unlikely that Tori and Era would have been able to guess such a thing by themselves. Abel recognized that mushrooms are a complicated product, and it's hard to know everything about them. Era said that you can make a mistake and cook poisonous mushrooms, and you can get poisoned. Hart advised to buy mushrooms only from him, because he will never sell poisonous mushrooms. And only he always has the best quality and freshest goods in his store. Abel did thank Hart for his help, but advised him to be more restrained. The vegetable lover admitted that he would do anything for vegetables and could hardly react otherwise. Tori said that Hart was a kind guy, even though his love for vegetables looked like an addiction. Era reminded him that that's how Tori likes to do nothing and sleep. Tori immediately explained that his hobby is much more enjoyable than looking at vegetables. This time his father did buy a lot of groceries, and it was hard to carry the backpack. But Abel continued to listen to Hart. The vegetable connoisseur demonstrated a beautiful tomato and told how delicious it becomes when roasted. And also, tomatoes can be baked together with cheese and meat. Abel was interested in such dishes and decided to cook something similar. Tori was also interested in the tomato casserole and kept waiting for his father to finish his conversation with Hart. Era offered to go with her to buy fruit and condiments. Tori was glad for the opportunity to walk around some more and agreed to Era's suggestion. Tori inquired about what kind of condiments Era wanted to buy. The girl decided to buy just sugar and some fruit, while Tori expected to hear something more. Therefore, the walk promised not to be long. Era immediately found the right store and asked for some good sugar. The merchant showed a small sack and announced a price of 3 silver coins for that amount of sugar. Era examined the pouch carefully and decided to check the contents first. The merchant praised the girl for her vigilance. Condiments were very expensive in this world. But still, not so much so that ordinary commoners couldn't afford condiments. There was the only nuance that if one bought condiments from a merchant who didn't mainly specialize in condiments, one could fall for impure condiments. But usually there were no problems about seasonings in this market. Still, it was good to check once more. Era was serious about such things and quickly determined the quality of the goods. The girl happily thanked for the goods and handed over 3 silver coins. The next destination turned out to be a store nearby that sold fresh fruit. Era promised to handle it quickly, and Tori decided to wait for his companion and not go anywhere. Left alone, Tori turned his attention to the magic tool store. Magical tools in this world are filled with power by wizards. And as their name implies, magic tool stores sell tools to anyone who wants them and usually offered a wide variety. These special tools are powered by magic stones extracted from monsters. Such tools are very useful for people. They are used to extract water or make fire and other necessary things. Tori decided to search among the assortment of goods for a magic tool to customize defense magic. Such a serious item had to cost quite a lot. It was interesting to see it. The special magic ball cost as much as 120 gold coins. Such a price was really high, because usually magic items were sold for around 50 gold coins, and such an item was unaffordable for Tori. Such an item wasn't really necessary for Tori since he wasn't fighting anyone. Although among the magic items there were some that he would like to buy for himself. The magic items that could produce hot or cold air were of interest. And if one were to buy such a magic item for himself, one would be able to sleep in bliss regardless of the season. Tori often thought of his past life where he had enjoyed using an air conditioner and wanted to get something similar. In the end, Tori found the right magical tool, which was so named, creating warm air. The price of such a miracle was 60 gold coins. And the magic tool that created cold air cost 70 gold coins. Such tools also used large magic stones, and it was too expensive for Tori to buy such items. The prices upset the young comfort lover. Era noticed Tori sadly considering the magic tools again. Tori admitted that he was interested in magic tools that created warm and cold air. Era looked at the items with interest and replied that they couldn't buy such a thing in a lifetime. After all, such expensive magical tools were only available to nobles and wealthy merchants. Tori agreed and felt that such money he would need to raise for many years. Tori dreamily said that thanks to such magic tools, he would be able to sleep much better. After all, it is a true pleasure to sleep in a cool room in the hot summer, or to warm up a room to a comfortable temperature in the cold winter. Era replied that she didn't expect anything else, because Tori only dreams of sleeping better. Although such expensive magic tools can be used for more than that. Tori had long ago stopped marveling at the people of this world, for they rarely gave much thought to their own comfort. But Tori, on the other hand, wanted to enjoy life and feel relaxed while resting. Tori asked his friend if it was so bad to strive for something good and live for their dreams. Era asked that is it really Tori's dream to buy such magical items. The young innkeeper replied that it would be a real pleasure for him to buy these magical tools, but he would need to save up money to do so. Tori realized that it would take him a long time to raise such a large sum of money, and it would be a good idea to think of some way to make money quickly. Era suggested that to start achieving his dream, Tori should go to a fruit store. The boy didn't understand what could be the connection between his dream and the fruit store. The girl reminded him that she still needed to buy fruit, and everyone forgot about it engrossed in conversation. Era reminded that Abel and Tori had promised to buy delicious fruits for Letty, and if they didn't, her sister would be upset. A cheerful Era then announced that it was time for her to go about her business and advised Tori not to forget her words. Tori thanked her friend and wished her good luck. Her father admitted that Era always has a very kind demeanor and Tori should pay attention to such things. Abel then asked if Tori had any feelings for the girl. His father explained that he meant if his son likes Era as a girl. Tori wondered, for the girl was indeed very beautiful. But Tori felt a lot more mature than he really was, and so he didn't pay too much attention to such young girls. His father, of course, didn't understand everything and reminded his son that he was already 12 years old, and so it was time to get a girlfriend. Abel said that at that age he himself had often asked girls out. Tori asked if his mother knew about his father's adventures. But Abel explained that their man-to-man conversation should stay between them, and it was not at all necessary for Mom to know about everything. Father asked Tori not to tell his mother about his revelations. Young Letty rejoiced at the return of her father and brother. Adele immediately gave his daughter the promised sweet fruit. Abel then reminded Tori to attend to dinner, for they had spent a lot of time shopping. All the food in the kitchen was very fresh and could smell vegetables. Father asked Tori to chop all the vegetables and mushrooms and then offered to watch and learn how to properly cut the meat they had bought. Tori of course agreed and thought it was a good thing that he didn't have to cut the meat himself. Tori very quickly chopped up all the vegetables and mushrooms and put them neatly into a huge bowl. Then it was time for the huge piece of monster meat. Pretty soon, Abel had already tackled the meat and cut everything into small pieces. The stew was cooking and Abel only stirred it occasionally. Tori smelled the unfamiliar and very bright aroma of the unknown meat. His father said that the flavor of this meat was very different from the usual chicken, and all the guests would not remain indifferent to the new dish. Tori felt hungry, and it began to distract him from his work. Heard someone's voice who also appreciated the smell of Afghan meat. The smell of the new dish attracted the aristocrat Michael and the trio of young adventurers. Everyone immediately wanted to taste the meat stew, which caused the guests of the inn to salivate profusely. Tori cheered the noisy company and welcomed everyone back. Helmina confessed that she always likes the stew that Mr. Abel makes. But Ralph decided that it was Tori who was cooking today. That wasn't quite true, and Tori explained that it was his father who did most of the cooking and he only helped with the vegetables. Everyone was surprised at the huge piece of meat that was still left uncut and asked if it was some kind of monster meat. Abel nervously replied that it was Afghan meat and asked everyone to take tables and not disturb him in the kitchen. Father reminded Tori that there would be many visitors soon, and they should hurry up with the preparations. When evening came, many guests returned to the inn, and it became very merry and noisy. Everyone was eating and drinking and discussing the past day, showing different emotions. It was clear that with the large number of guests, the meat stew would quickly run out, and so Father wanted to make as much of it as possible. Abel asked Tori to take care of the turnip and mushroom soups. Meanwhile, he would prepare the meat dishes, which needed to be made more. Tori did not even notice how quickly the sky became dark, which meant that soon people would return from work and the hall will be filled with visitors. When Tori looked out of the kitchen and into the hall, he was surprised to see that there were already a lot of people, and his mother and Letty were quickly taking orders for food. There were more and more requests to come and take orders, and it was clearly going to be a busy evening. Shira and Letty were clearly unable to cope with the flow of customers and responded to requests to come over by asking them to wait a little longer. Letty often came running to her father and inquired about the readiness of orders. Abel was also worried and asked to inform the inn guests that the Afghan steaks would have to wait a little longer. And in general, their quantity would be limited, so everyone should realize that there would not be enough meat for all the guests. Letty quickly ran to the customers and conveyed all her father's wishes to the customers, advising them to order the meat quickly so that they could enjoy its incredible flavor. The crowd of customers murmured approvingly, and many hurried to order steaks. Abel only resented the fact that many of the visitors had already gotten drunk. Tori asked his father not to worry, for it often happened that while the customers were waiting for their food, they were getting drunk and trying to pass the time. Tori and her father were worried about Letty, because it was always difficult to work when there were too many drunken visitors. After all, the girl was only 10 years old, and some adult men behaved too impolitely and were often rude. Although Letty had already learned a lot and usually tried not to react to the provocations of drunken visitors. Soon, Ricotta's assistant appeared and apologized for being late. Abel immediately asked to fill in for Letty and let her get some rest. The cute girl Ricotta was studying in the theater and complained that today's class was too long. Abel asked the girl not to worry and to change quietly. And once she replaced Letty, then the daughter could rest from visitors in the kitchen. Ricotta promised to quickly change clothes and get to work. Just a couple minutes later, Ricotta was ready to work and surprised her father with her speed. Ricotta explained that she had learned to change clothes quickly in the theater where costumes had to be changed frequently. This cheerful girl aspired to be a theater actress. She had theater practice every day, and after she finished, she would go to the inn and work part-time as a maid. Her shifts were always in the evening at the most difficult time to deal with customers. Abel sent Ricotta and Tori to serve the customers and reminded his son to take his sister's place later. Tori himself would have preferred to stay in the kitchen at such a time, since all he had to do was prepare portions of soup. But one could not argue with his father, and Tori sent his sister to the kitchen. Letty advised her brother to serve the table at the end of the hall first, as they had been waiting to order there for a long time. Ricardo immediately distributed the area of the hall and pointed out Tori's part of it. It was easier to work this way so as not to interfere with each other. Tori went to the table to take the order, and the guys asked where to do Letty. Tori explained that it was her turn to work in the kitchen. The guys regretfully replied that they'd rather be served by a pretty girl than a regular guy. But Tori reminded them that they would then get a chance to taste the soup that Letty would make, and they would definitely enjoy it. Tori explained that his sister cooks better than him, and that's why the guests like it better. The indignant visitors agreed with Tori and made no further complaints. The bald guy asked for soup to be brought to him. Tori offered a choice of turnip soup or mushroom soup, and advised him to try the excellent stew and ndefkye meat with fresh cream. Ricardo, meanwhile, asked for mugs to be filled with the fresh beer that customers were demanding. And Ricardo had a very strong voice, and she sometimes didn't even go to the kitchen, but just called loudly what she needed. Such a voice the girl trained in the theater and used it while working. At the same time, Ricardo was very polite and friendly. Tori suddenly heard some visitors swearing. As it turned out, one of the guys had almost eaten someone else's steak, and a conflict was breaking out because of that. Tori thought that soon there might be a fight at all, because these guys had drunk enough beer and looked aggressive. Letty was afraid to go into the angry customers and asked her brother to serve the table where the customers were fighting. Tori was not too eager to go there, but his sister reminded him that it was his time to serve in the hall, and his mother asked him to bring those guys some beer as well. In the meantime, the arguing was getting worse, and the guys were insulting each other and practically fighting. Gaining courage, Tori nonchalantly walked over to the table and offered to take away 2 excellent steins and 2 mugs of cold beer. The guys calmed down a bit and were distracted by Tori. The young waiter himself advised them to eat quickly while the meat was still cold. To everyone's surprise, the conflict ended immediately, and the guys began to eat meat and drink beer peacefully. Ralph praised Tori for his courage, because not everyone wants to approach drunken, aggressive people. Tori was already used to such situations, and that's why he didn't want his little sister to do table service in the evening. Tori then turned his attention to the staircase where a magnificently dressed courtesan named Natalia was slowly descending. The smell of her floral perfume interrupted the aromas of the kitchen for a while, and Tori remembered the moment he had been in the girls' room. Not only Tori was delighted by the beautiful Natalia's appearance, but almost all the men in the room stopped eating and stared at the courtesan. Natalia had changed a lot by the evening and put on her working image, which was supposed to attract the eyes of the opposite sex. Just at this time, she would go to work in the brothel, and everyone would see her off with an attentive look. One of the drunken guys shouted across the room if he could spend that night with Natalia. The girl calmly replied that any gentleman could visit the establishment where she worked, and for a fee she could give her time. Many dreamily continued to stare at the beautiful female body, and Tori blushed with embarrassment. After all, his consciousness was much older than his 12-year-old body. The drunken guy swore and complained about his poverty, for a night with such a courtesan cost at least 30 gold coins. Some began to discuss how Natalia should be booked 6 months in advance, because she always has a lot of clients. Then the gorgeous courtesan headed into the hall, and everyone immediately fell silent. Natalia slowly approached Tori and kissed the young man in front of everyone. Many people almost fainted from surprise, because everyone wanted to be in Tori's shoes. Natalia quietly told Tori, who was blushing with embarrassment, that they would see each other in the morning, but now she had to go to work. Next, everyone watched in silence as the courtesan left the inn in spectacular fashion. The indignant male customers were jealous of Tori and immediately began to demand that he work and bring beer as soon as possible. In fact, everyone just did not understand how such a beautiful woman could kiss such an inconspicuous guy and still in full view of everyone. After a few hours, the inn hall was completely empty and Ricardo and Tori wished good luck to the last visitors. Ricardo sighed in relief and said that the hardest part of the job was over and now it was time to clean up. Tori only marveled at the girl's energy, for she never seemed to tire. There was really a lot of cleaning work. It was necessary to wipe all the tables and wash all the dishes. And there were a lot of dishes in the evenings. To begin with, it was necessary to collect, of course, and this was not an easy job. After all, you can't break plates by picking them up carelessly. Abel, finishing with the work, said that now Tori could be free and go to rest. Tori was really looking forward to this moment as his little sister had been asleep for a long time. His father said that Tori would have to get up early because tomorrow they would be selling takeout food and everything needed to be prepared for that. Tori wished everyone a good night and hurried to his room. Ricardo and Mom reminded Tori to stay awake for a long time and wake up early. Once in his room, Tori immediately fell on his bed and felt a pleasant weakness. His body relaxed and his legs gradually stopped hurting. Tori remembered the entire past day and all the events flashed by as if on fast forward. Tori felt that today he had worked to the point of exhaustion and should now sleep soundly. To sleep quickly, Tori began to remember the events of the past day. He woke up very early at 5 in the morning, and the guests began to appear at 8 in the morning. Then he got busy cleaning the building and the rooms, including the laundry and reception area. All of this was before the lunch break. Then they prepared everything they needed to serve the guests. They went to the market to get fresh food for dinner and served the visitors until late in the evening. It turned out that Tori worked at least 10 hours, although he had a lunch break when he could get some sleep. Visiting the market could also be considered a vacation because it was fun and interesting. He only managed to sleep for a few hours during the day. In addition, Tori often daydreamed while working, when the guests did not disturb with their orders. All these worries were completely different from his previous job in his previous life. After all, there he had to sit at a desk and work all day long. And there was no opportunity to rest or go out. It was certainly not pleasant to get up very early every day, but be that as it may, this life was much better than the previous one. After all, in his previous life, he had literally died at his job. Gradually, Tori began to fall asleep, and once again he was convinced that this was the most pleasant moment of the whole day. Tomorrow would be a new day, and again, it would be necessary to work calmly and measured, so as not to lose unnecessary strength and good mood. After all, this is the most important thing. Tori did not want to repeat the mistakes of his past life, and so he carefully monitored his health. Abel, as promised, came very early and began to wake his son. Tori woke up from a sound sleep, even frightened, because he did not realize that it was his father. But as it turned out, he had to get up even earlier than usual, because his father was going to prepare food for the market. Tori wasn't too happy about getting up so early, but it was useless to argue with his father. Tori was still thinking, slowly trying to remember what he needed to do first. But his father asked him to quickly change his clothes and go down to the kitchen, as there was no precious time to waste. Tori really wanted to go to bed with the new one and not go anywhere. But Abel, as if he read his son's mind, said that he should not go to bed again. Father asked to do the street trade on the street was Tori, and to do this, it was necessary to go to the transfer point. But first they had to figure out what to prepare, and so the father waited for suggestions from his son. Tori thought of meal options based on the food available. Abel explained, food should be available to everyone, and therefore its price should not be expensive. Takeout food usually cost no more than 3 copper coins, and so one had to cook sparingly to make any profit. Tori remembered how the adventurer Ralph had recently asked for a simple meal of a cutlet sandwich. Such a meal was very much to many people's liking. It was simple and hearty. Tori began to finely chop an onion, and then fried it until browned. The young cook decided to use the meat that was left after dinner, and it too had to be cut very finely. His father watched his son's work with interest and asked if he had ever made such sandwiches before. Tori promised that it would be fine and everyone would enjoy such food. Tori prepared the mincemeat very quickly, and all that was left was to form the cutlets. Salt and pepper also had to be added to the minced meat, and then everything had to be mixed thoroughly. Then onions and eggs were added to the mince and mixed again. The most difficult part of cooking was mixing the mincemeat. You had to do it very well so that the cutlets would not fall apart during frying. After that, you could start cooking the cutlets themselves. It was necessary to make them not too thick and neat, so that the meat was evenly cooked and did not remain raw. The frying was to be done evenly on all sides until crispy. As soon as the cutlets became the desired golden color, it was necessary to make the fire quieter and cover the pan with a lid. While the cutlets were stewing on low heat, Tori decided to finely chop the cabbage. And then, making sure the cutlets were ready, Tori transferred them to fresh bread along with the finely chopped cabbage. A piece of bread was also placed on top, and thus a delicious sandwich was made. My father was interested in the unusual dish and asked if he could try the sandwich. Abel took a bite of the hot sandwich and admired the rich and pleasant flavor, for which he praised his son. Tori explained that the sandwich would become even more flavorful when it was soaked. The bread will absorb the juices of the meat, and that will make it much softer. And even a cold sandwich is delicious, so the longer you hold it, the more intense the flavor becomes. Abel praised his son for the perfectly cooked dish and called him a real cook. Tori then went to sell his sandwiches and noticed a lot of wagons, which means there will be many people willing to buy food here. In the south of this city, there is an entire neighborhood that serves as a staging area for horse-drawn carriages. For a fee, they can make deliveries of goods or travel to neighboring villages or towns. Tori immediately met Era, who had also decided to engage in the traveling trade. Tori complained that he hadn't gotten a good night's sleep today and had to get up very early to help his father in the kitchen. The girl was interested in what Tori would be selling. The young cook explained that he and his father had made meat and cabbage sandwiches. Era had obviously heard of such a thing for the first time and was curious. Tori asked that hadn't the girl tasted his delicious sandwiches. But Era confessed that she rarely ate the food Tori made at all. In fact, Tori didn't make such sandwiches only for her mom and sister. As it turned out, Era had sandwiches too, but only with black buffalo meat, and there were some pieces of meat that weren't used for steaks. The girl offered to swap the sandwiches and try to see who would taste better. Tori agreed because he himself was interested in trying black buffalo meat sandwiches. Era asked how Tori made his sandwiches in the first place. The young cook didn't keep a secret and said that he started by chopping the meat very finely, then added various ingredients such as onions, eggs, and seasonings and mixed everything thoroughly. This was the first time Era had heard such a recipe and didn't know if it was even possible to try such a thing. After all, such food was unusual for her, and she was a little scared. Tori was even a little upset at her reaction and said that his father liked his sandwiches very much, and he personally approved the recipe. Such a statement affected Era because for her, Abel was really an authority figure, and she dared to look at the strange dish. The girl liked the appearance of the sandwich, as well as the pleasant smell from the fresh meat. After thinking for a bit, Era got ready to try it and took a bite of the sandwich. The girl even blushed with surprise because she really liked the taste. The sandwich was very tender and juicy. Tori explained that such a tender texture of the sandwich was due to the fact that the bread was perfectly soaked and absorbed all the juice of the meat and cabbage. Tori was very happy that the girls liked his sandwich, and now it was time for him to try the competing cuisine. A passing adventurer was interested in the food and asked what kind of strange sandwiches Tori was selling. It was the first possible customer, and Tori decided not to waste time. But the adventurer's companions advised their friend not to waste money, because he could buy bread and any stuffing himself, and then quietly prepare any sandwiches in time. And so it will be much cheaper and tastier than buying food on the street from strangers. The adventurer agreed with his friends and admitted that sometimes he would also buy boodles on the street, and they turned out to be completely tasty, and so the money was spent in vain. Tori was even offended by such feedback, because no one had even tasted his sandwiches, although in some ways these people were right. Rarely was street food tasty because of its cheap cost. Tori still decided to recommend his sandwiches and began to convince the adventurers that his food would change their minds about street food. The The guy was sure that the taste of his sandwiches would make these people ask for more. The girl wizard remarked that this was an overconfident statement. Still, all three adventurers decided to try the unfamiliar dish from the young merchant. The price of 3 copper coins didn't seem too much, and the swordsman bought 1 box of sandwich. Tori was excited about the first sale, and the adventurer said rather calmly that there were so many different sandwiches all over the world, so it was hard to surprise him. The sword adventurer admitted that he is a big fan of such food. And every time he finds himself in a new city, he makes sure to buy himself sandwiches. He also does the same thing when he leaves to try new things on the road. Tori asked that if their team of adventurers were already leaving the city because they could visit their wonderful inn. Tori realized that these people were in a hurry now and invited them to visit from the tavern in the future and enjoy the wonderful fresh food dishes. The swordsman promised that on his next visit to the city, he would definitely visit the inn. Tori said that the inn was called the Bird Tavern and was easy to find in the city. After completing their trade, Tori and Era decided that it was now time for them to disperse home. Era praised Tori for his abilities as a trader and decided to experiment with sandwiches too. Tori admitted that it was hard to sell food that no one had ever heard of. After all, it's not easy to get people to try something new since people don't want to spend money taking risks. Era confessed that she really liked Tori's sandwich, and so those adventurous people will like it too, and everyone else too. After all, such sandwiches are really very tasty and juicy. And those people will definitely come to the inn afterwards. Tori agreed, and then the friends said goodbye until they met again. Such trade liked the young inventor of sandwiches, and he sincerely hoped that thanks to his efforts, there would be new visitors to the tavern. Toward evening, the adventurer with the sword came into the tavern and surprised Tori with his visit. It was very strange to see this man, as his team was about to leave the city. The adventurer explained that they were delighted by the incredible taste of the sandwich, and so they decided to rush back to the city to find Tori. The whole team began to praise Tori for his wonderful cooking abilities. The girl wizard as well as everyone else admitted that they had never eaten anything like it, and it was the best sandwich they had ever had. Tori was delighted at such high praise for his sandwiches, for even in the morning, these adventurers were skeptical of such food. Abel was happy with his son's achievement and praised Tori for an excellent result of the takeout trade. His father immediately suggested that the guests try other dishes and promised to add his son's special sandwiches to the menu. Tori was of course happy to have new and interesting visitors, but he realized that because of this, he would now have more work to do. And so it was. His father made him prepare a lot of sandwiches, and Tori asked him to give him a rest. Tori noticed that the adventurer was very upset about the lack of money and asked if things were so bad in the team. Ralph confessed that with such successes, they would soon not even be able to pay for a night's lodging, and it was very depressing, and they also had to eat and feed the horses. Tori didn't know the real reason for the poor financial state of these people, but it was sad to see it all. Although their inn charged a relatively small fee for rooms and food, Helmina blamed Ralph and Sin for their inability to control their spending. And because they spend money on nonsense, it leads to problems. Tori remarked that adventurers should spend coins to maintain their weapons, equipment, buy various potions, food, and many other things that are needed while traveling. Helmina explained that on top of all this, her colleagues buy other useless things that destroy their small budget. Helmina recalled how a few days ago she asked to buy cheap meat, but instead Ralph spent a lot of money and bought expensive monster meat. Ralph immediately started to justify himself and told her that the Frog King's meat was very tasty and extremely rare, and so he couldn't resist the temptation. Helmina was very unhappy with this answer and reminded that she always clearly distributes finances, and if she does not allow to buy expensive things and food, then you cannot do it. Ralph tried to justify himself, but it was useless. Tori noticed that the situation in the adventure team had gotten too aggravated. Shin said that it had only happened 3 days ago and Helmina still couldn't calm down. But then Shin got the brunt of it as well. Helmina accused the archer of buying overpriced magical arrows that didn't need to be bought lately. Shin started to justify himself and said that such arrows were needed when attacking strong monsters. But Helmina asked how they could help if Shin never takes them with him. Tori was shocked by such a scandal, and he felt sorry for Helmina. Ralph and Shin replied that Helmina herself spends a lot of money to buy magic stones. But the girl magician declared that it was a completely different matter and could not be blamed. The tension among the group of adventurers reached a maximum. The guys recalled that during the battle, Helmina constantly stands behind and only uses magic for a maximum of 4 spells per battle. And so it was not clear why the magic stones that cost so much were being burned so quickly. Helmina became agitated and could not explain how this was happening. Sometimes wizards use magic stones to use spells, thus reducing the consumption of the wizard's own magical powers. But in this case, the strange thing is that Helmina uses up her magic stones very quickly. Although according to the guy's story, she rarely uses spells during battle. Ralph and Sin stated that they know very well how Helmina used magic stones to summon light magic at night. Therefore, she was a hypocrite herself, because everyone was saving money for candles while she was spending expensive magic stones to read her silly books at night. Tori realized that everyone on this team was at fault in their own way. The girl was visibly upset at this truth, but never admitted her guilt and only replied that she was doing magical research. Shin decided to bring out his sorceress friend and demonstrated the book she was reading at night and expending expensive magical stones. The adventurer archer asked how Helmina could conduct her magical research by studying women's romance novels. Helmina instantly turned red with embarrassment and anger. The girl became indignant and asked that did Shin dare to go through her things in her room. But the archer replied that he did no such thing and was not capable of such meanness. From what he said, Helmina had left that stupid book in the common room by herself or just dropped it accidentally. Tori watched the adventurer's scandal with interest and realized that it was very bad if Helmina really was that careless and left such a book in plain sight. And it would be very bad if such an adult book happened to be seen by Letty, for it was too early for her to read such a thing. Though since Mama and Letty are always cleaning the rooms on this floor, they have probably seen such a book more than once. Helmina, meanwhile, excused herself and said that books help her to calm down, while Ralph and Sin buy useless things impulsively without even thinking about the consequences. Shin and Ralph asked Tori what he thought about it. Who was really wrong? Tori decided to answer in a completely honest and unbiased manner and stated that everyone was equally at fault, so everyone should admit their guilt. Tori didn't expect that his honest answer would make the whole team of adventurers depressed. Tori said that since they had found the reason for the overspending together, why not take the opportunity to talk calmly and solve all the problems together? And in the future only buy things together with common consent. And if Helmina, Ralph, and Sik really share all the money between them, then it would be right to discuss everything together. And then no one will be offended and everyone can afford to buy something useful without annoying the rest of the team. Such an idea was clearly liked by all the adventurers, and judging from their excited faces, everyone would be happy to settle the conflict. Helmina admitted that she was really wrong, and she should have talked to all her other friends before buying expensive magic stones and useless books. Sik also admitted his mistakes and promised to take better care and try to reuse his arrows from now on. He also promised not to buy magic arrows anymore. Ralph, of course, also followed his friend's example and admitted his guilt in wasting money. Ralph promised that from now on, he would buy only what was really necessary for the team and would listen to Helmina's recommendations. Tori was pleased at this use of adventurers, for now they were talking quietly as if they had not folded at all. Every team of adventurers must communicate. All team members should trust each other and have a good relationship, for this is very important in dangerous situations. There should be no hard feelings and no arguments of any kind. After talking a little, Helmina's team decided that they need to earn a lot of money to eat well and buy different useful things for everyone. In order to do that, it was decided to accept a mission to destroy dangerous monsters. Everyone unanimously agreed that they should change their situation and try to develop as adventurers. Tori was now finally convinced that all the problems in this team were now solved, and he could no longer disturb the adventurers with his presence. At that moment, a completely wet Shira and Letty ran into the tavern. It turned out that it had started raining heavily outside, and her mother and sister were rushing to collect the dried laundry. Helmina was visibly surprised by the unexpected rain, and Tori advised to stay in the tavern, as it would be unpleasant for the adventurers to go on a mission during a heavy rain, Helmina didn't think much and announced to her team that they would rest today. After all, if someone gets wet in the rain and gets sick, it will incur unnecessary medical expenses. Ralph and Sin were sad that the adventure would have to be postponed until tomorrow, but they still didn't mind being in the tavern and resting in a cozy and warm place. Tori once again made sure that all the adventurers had really flexible schedules and could determine their own time for tasks. The main thing is that this team of adventurers should not lose their motivation until tomorrow, and that no one should quarrel with anyone else.